Okay, so everyone. Very good, Erev Shabbat. As we all understand, the Torah has many faces to it and many nuances, all of which are eternal and important. So we have such a nuance in this week's Parsha that I want to discuss with you, and it has broader ramifications than just the interpretation regarding this section of the Torah. We have a rule, derech eretz kodma laTorah. Derech eretz means proper behavior, a proper value system, a proper way to look at life. And that preceded Torah. So what do we mean that preceded Torah? Because the Torah is only in this week's Parsha. And in essence, this deals with the question that Rashi raised, that we discussed before, that the Torah should have begun with the mitzvah, with the commandment of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, the Jewish calendar. Why does it begin with the entire narrative of the book of Bereshit? And then the story of the slavery in Egypt. So a broad answer to that is that the Torah is a system of values. And that the book of Bereshit teaches us values. Avram Avinu says the value of chesed, of doing good for others, of tolerance of others, of optimism, of faith. Yitzchak Avinu, the value of persistence, to dig the wells again and again and again. Yaakov Avinu, how he has to deal with Lavan, and he has to deal with his own internal family. So these are all lessons of life that are not necessarily bound up in putting on tefillin or eating kosher. So therefore, that's what part of the idea that Chazal had in mind when they said derech eretz kodma laTorah. Before we give the Torah, let's talk about derech eretz. Let's talk about this value system. How are you supposed to live your life? So it's supposed to be a life of goodness for others, of being able to rise from difficult situations, of being able to deal with people who do not deal well or honestly. All of this is part of this idea of Derech Eretz Kodma LaTorah. So in this week's Parsha, the Parsha begins with the story of Yitro. That's a strange place to begin. After all, in this week's Parsha, we're going to have the Aseret HaDvorim, the Ten Commandments. We're going to have the revelation from Sinai. We're going to have all of that. So why does the Torah begin with a seemingly minor incident about the appointment of judges, about Yitro and his son-in-law Moshe? And there's a dispute, as you know, amongst the great rabbis about when did this occur chronologically. Did it occur before the Torah was given? Did it occur after the Torah was given? And however, we will decide chronologically when it occurred, but in the Torah, it's written before the revelation at Sinai. It's like a preamble to the revelation at Sinai. So what does that have to do with the Torah? So if we, as we do, maintain that Derech Eretz Kodma LaTorah, the value systems of life precede the granting of the actual commandments of the Torah, so then there's something here in Derech Eretz. That's why the Torah wrote it before. The order of the way it's written in the Torah is itself a lesson. Even if we say it is not meant to be chronologically accurate. So what's the lesson here? What's the moral take? So I think if you just stop for a minute, I've always been amazed by this parsha. The rule in life is that sons-in-law don't like advice from fathers-in-law. It's not enough that I took your daughter off of your hands. You got to give me advice yet. And there always is a relationship that has to be constantly fostered between in-laws. Because to a certain extent, it's an unnatural situation. Yisro worshipped idols. Rashi quotes that there was not a pagan idol in the world that he did not examine and to a certain extent worship. At the end, he comes to the conclusion that the idols are all worthless. It's all false. And he comes to the belief in the God of Israel. And he comes to Moshe and he's converted. There's a difference of opinion in the Medrash. There are certain Midrashim that say, Bol he's Gayer. He came to be converted. Okay. So let me ask you the following scenario. There's a synagogue, and in the synagogue there are people who are in charge. There are people in charge of the finances. There are people in charge of dishing out the honors, of choosing who will be the chazonim, etc., etc. That's how every synagogue in the world works. There's a person that all of his life never went to a synagogue. In fact, he's hardly Jewish. And then one day he's struck by the enormity of life. And he decides that he will now become an observant Jew. And the next morning he gets up and he comes to the synagogue. And he observes that the Gabbai in charge gave this one to open the ark, and this one got the right to come to the Torah, etc. And he says to the Gabbai, you guys don't know what you're doing here. You got a terrible system. It's going to collapse. I'll tell you how to run it. What do you think the reaction would be? You'd be lucky to get out of there alive. Who you, what, where? Who gave you the right to come here and tell me what to do? So Yitro comes. Moshe Rabbeinu has a system in place. Yitro doesn't like the system. He says, no, Divo, you're going to wither away. The people won't be able to sustain it. So I'll tell you what to do. Let's go. I'll explain to you what to do. Appoint officers, delegate duties, be in charge of 1,000, in charge of 100, in charge of 50, in charge of 10. We'll create a whole civil service system here. It's almost 80,000 people he's creating. A bureaucracy worthy of the current Israeli world. So what should Moshe Rabbeinu have said to him? Should have said, Pa, take it easy. He just came. He didn't go through the 300 years of slavery. You're not a descendant of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Cool it. But what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He says, good idea. In heaven, they agree with you. And the next day, Moshe gets up and creates this bureaucracy. He listens to what Yitro told him to do. And he does it without flinching. And it becomes like a paradigm for how the Jewish people should be organized. The Gemara will discuss a town that has so many people. How many judges does it need? This is 1,000 years later. What kind of judicial system? What kind of civil service? Moshe does it without a murmur. So there's an amazing lesson here. That Chazal teach us that there's a rule in life. Accept truth, no matter who is the one that told it to you. No matter what the circumstances. No matter what the embarrassment. Accept the truth. Because the Torah is Torah Semes. The Torah ultimately is truth. If you're not willing to accept the truth because of side issues, it embarrasses you. The guy that told it to you is not good. It'll be a dishonor to me. Then you cannot accept the Torah. The Torah demands ultimate fealty to truth, to what is accurate. And therefore, that's why the Torah put this Parsha of Yitro and of the civil service, so to speak, of the Jewish people before the story of the Kabbalah Torah, before the story of the granting of the Torah itself. Because the Torah had to have an example of what it means to be true. And that's one of the great qualities of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he's not offended. We'll see that later too. That when Nadav and Avihu were killed, and there was a discussion about the bringing of the sacrifice, and Aaron was bereaved of his two sons. So Moshe said to do one thing, and Aaron said no. And Moshe admitted that Aaron was right. The Torah wrote it that way. The greater the person, the more difficult it is to admit that somehow that person is wrong. So the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim quotes Aristotle often. Aristotle is not Jewish, to put it mildly. But in the world of the Rambam, Aristotle was the intellectual giant. His ideas permeated the world, so much so that even later the Catholic Church, to a great extent, adopted all of his ideas to their detriment. So the Rambam was criticized. Well, you're quoting, a Greek philosopher, you're quoting him. So the Rambam wrote there the famous words that the Talmud teaches us. We have to accept truth no matter who says it. And if Aristotle is correct in this manner, so then we have to accept it and quote him. If you'll think about it, that's not an easy message to digest. We don't like to hear opinions from people who we feel are not our friends. And you'll see the whole essence of Moshe Rabbeinu is built upon that. The original story of Moshe. So he's born, his mother hides him for a few months, and then she puts him in a basket, then he floats on the Nile River. And he is saved there by the daughter of the Pharaoh, and he's nursed by his mother, he's taken care of by his sister. He grows up to be Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the story the Torah tells us. The preamble to that story is, and again, the nuance of the Torah. Why the Torah write it? It says, "Vayelech ish mibeis Levi, v'tikach es bas Levi." There was a man descended from Levi, that's Amram, Moshe's father, and he married the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu. He married a daughter of Levi, Yocheved. But the Torah is writing wedding invitations. It could speak in the story that there was a Jewish woman that was pregnant. She wanted to hide the child, etc. So the Medrash, and Rashi quotes it, the Medrash teaches us that Amram, for a moment, despaired about the future of the Jewish people. He saw the Jewish children cast into the Nile, mortared into the bricks of the pyramids. He said, how do you bring children into such a world? How do you bring children into a world of Hamas? When the whole world is Hamas. It can't be. Omad v'girish es ishto. So Amram divorced Yocheved. He sent her away. They weren't going to live together. She was not going to become pregnant. Terrible world. Which is really a little of the world that we live in today. Where in the Western countries in the world, you have, and even in China and other places, you have only a declining birth rate. A declining birth rate means that you don't have faith in the future. You don't believe that somehow things can get better. So why should I bring children into the world that they're only a pain and an expense and a heartbreak? I don't need that. So the Medrash says to us, fantastic story. Medrash says to us that the oldest child of Amram is Miriam. She's 5 years old when Moshe Rabbeinu was born. Aaron is 3. She's 5. Moshe is the newborn child. So when Amram sent away Yocheved, the Medrash says that Miriam came to her father. So just picture it, the 5-year-old girl comes to the great sage of Israel, the grandson of Levi. And she says to him, you're wrong. You're worse than Paro. Paro only decreed against the male children, and you're decreeing against all children. That can't be. You're wrong. Okay, let's look at the scenario that Chazal created for us. Because all of this is, they are creating scenarios that we can learn from. It's not a question of historical accuracy here. It's a question of moral clarity. You got a 5-year-old child, and you make a decision, a very important decision. And the 5-year-old child comes to you and says, Daddy, you're wrong. Your decision is incorrect. It's counterproductive. You're worse than Paro. What is the reaction? Either he'll say, I have to send you to a different gan, or where did you get such chutzpah to talk to your father like that? Who gave you the right to say this to me? And Amram listens to her, and he reunites with Yocheved, and from that Moshe is born, and the redemption of Israel takes place. That's the story that Chazal portrayed for us. Because that's Kabbalas Emes and Mishomra. Accept the truth from whoever, the 5-year-old told you the truth. Forget she's 5 years old. Forget you're the greatest man in the world. She told you the truth. It's undeniable what she said. So you have to accept it. And that's the secret of Moshe Rabbeinu throughout his career. That's why it says, Ish Moshe Onav Ma'od. He's the most modest of person. How do we reflect modesty? Moshe Rabbeinu knows who he is. Moshe Rabbeinu knows he was on Sinai, that he went 40 days without food or water, that he had a direct connection with God, so to speak. But when Moshe Rabbeinu hears that somebody tells him the truth, he forgets he's Moshe Rabbeinu. I remember when I was in the yeshiva, it's a very long time ago. I'm amazed that anyway. So we had a great rabbi from Eretz Israel who somehow came to Chicago to raise money for then it was the refugees of the Shoah that were coming to the land of Israel. And they invited him to deliver a Torah lecture in the study hall of our yeshiva. And so we had 250 students there, ranging from age 11 to 25. And this great rabbi got up And he began the lecture. And it was Bilbo was built beautifully with great ideas, with insights. But one of the rules then, I don't know if it still exists today, but one of the rules then was that if he had a good question on what he was saying, he could interrupt him. So one of our star students, not me, but one of our star students interrupted him and he said, Rebbe, but there's a Gemara exactly opposite to what you're saying. And the man stopped for a minute and he thought about it. Then he closed the Gemara in front of him. He said, you're right. And he sat down. So afterwards, our Rebbe said, this man that said, that delivered the lecture is such a genius, he could have answered it, could have gotten out of it, could have reinterpreted the Gemara, that it should fit what he says. But that wouldn't be the truth. Torah that is not truth is not Torah. It's ego. It's the inability to admit that somehow it may not be the way you said it is. So before the Jewish people accept the Torah teaches us, Torah, we look for truth, no matter what the source may be, no matter how embarrassing it may be. And if you'll think about it, that's the whole concept of tshuva. Tshuva is to admit that you were wrong, that the truth is not the way you thought it was. And that's why the Torah thinks and expresses that the greatest of all human attributes is modesty, humility, because that is what gives us the ability to recognize the truth and to accept it. And that becomes naturally the predecessor to the acceptance of the Torah and the understanding of the value system of the Torah. So thank you for coming on this rainy morning. Have a very good Shabbat, and see you next week, God willing. Thank you.